They thought they could teach me a lesson. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how patience turned betrayal into the sweetest justice. They sold everything I owned, called me reckless, told me I needed to learn a lesson. They laughed while I watched, not because I had given up, but because I was planning. Stay with me, because what I did next would make them realize underestimating me was their biggest mistake. Before I dive in, remember this: patience isn't waiting. It's planning in silence and letting the world reveal itself when the time is right. I was 26 when my parents decided I needed a wake-up call. I had been careful with money saved, every penny invested wisely, and yet they thought I was too sheltered, too soft, too unprepared for the real world. So one weekend while I was away for work, they sold everything I owned: furniture, jewelry, my car, even my small art collection. Each piece gone, each memory erased, and all under the guise of teaching me a lesson. When I came home and saw the empty rooms, the silence of missing possessions, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange calm, a quiet fire that began to burn inside me. They watched my reaction, expecting tears, anger begging, but I just nodded and said, "If this is how you teach me, then I will learn." I spent the following months quietly rebuilding, saving, investing, watching, observing every detail about the family home, every pattern, every habit, every conversation where they gossiped about neighbors and their dream house. I noticed that the house they had dreamed of for years was finally for sale, the perfect opportunity. But I waited, because patience, I had learned, multiplies the power of action. I told no one, not friends, not colleagues, not even the lawyer I consulted. This was a plan that required silence, observation, and timing. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I watched as my parents continued their usual routines, unaware that I had been quietly preparing, saving every extra penny, studying the market, learning how to make the purchase without their knowledge. It was no small task. The house was expensive, their dream home, but I had built my foundation wisely, and I knew the right moment would come. The day the house went on the market, I woke early before the sun rose. The quiet streets reflected the calm determination I felt inside. I contacted the agent, made the offers, signed the papers, all without my parents knowing. Every step was deliberate, every move calculated. By the afternoon, the deal was done. The house was mine, keys in my pocket, ownership officially transferred. I waited until evening, the time my parents usually returned from errands, their laughter and chatter filling the air. They had no idea what had just happened when they walked up the driveway. I was there, waiting, calm, smiling quietly. They froze, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. I could see the shock, the disbelief, the sudden realization that the house they had dreamed about for years now belonged to me. I handed them the keys, not angrily, not with gloating, just calmly, as if presenting a gift, a polite, final lesson. My father tried to protest, claimed the sale was unfair. My mother whispered about mistakes, but I simply shook my head and said, "This was your lesson: patience, planning, and humility." They didn't shout, they didn't cry, they just stood there, processing, because no one likes to be outmaneuvered by someone they underestimated. I changed the locks quietly that night, ensuring they could not enter, not out of malice, but as the ultimate proof that independence and careful planning are stronger than arrogance or entitlement. Watching them leave confused, silent, I felt no joy in humiliation, no thrill in revenge, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done what they never expected, what they never thought I could do. Over the following weeks, I renovated the house, added my touches, made it mine, not in spite, but in proof of what can happen when patience meets opportunity. My parents reached out eventually, apologies, questions, attempts at negotiation. I listened politely, answered calmly, but never returned the keys, because the lesson they wanted to teach me had come full circle, and now it was theirs to learn. The house stood as a reminder, not of wealth or power, but of strategy, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from never underestimating someone who has learned from every mistake. The days after the house purchase were surreal. My parents still tried to process it, calling me hesitant, careful, as if speaking too loudly might undo the impossible. I welcomed them politely, answered questions with calm precision, every word measured, every tone steady, because I knew the lesson was no longer mine to hold, it belonged to them. Walking through the house for the first time as the legal owner, I felt a strange mix of triumph and serenity. Every room held memories of their dreams, now transformed into proof of patience and planning. Every corner, a reminder of what careful strategy can achieve. Neighbors, whispered friends were surprised, and my parents learned that true power isn't flashy, it isn't loud, it is quiet, it is calculated, it is deliberate. I spent hours reflecting on the months of preparation, the years of rebuilding after they sold my possessions, the long nights of watching, learning, and waiting. It all culminated in this moment, not a moment of vengeance, but a moment of vindication, a moment of self-respect, a moment of quiet triumph. My parents visited the house occasionally, not to intrude but to see, to witness, the proof of what they underestimated. Every room, every fixture, every detail a testament to the lessons they never expected to learn. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub their noses in it, because there is no need silence and observation accomplish more than anger ever could, and in that quiet, they saw the value of respect and the cost of underestimating someone who refuses to be shaken. Friends and colleagues watched the story unfold. They marveled at the patience it took, at the calm precision, at the ability to wait and act only when the moment was perfect. Sometimes, I would sit in the living room, the keys in my hand, the locks changed, the house entirely mine, and think back to the day they sold everything I owned, thinking they were teaching me a lesson, not realizing the real lesson was for them. I realized that true satisfaction isn't in retaliation, it's in knowing you've rebuilt, not through anger, not through confrontation, but through careful planning, persistence, and patience. Watching the world reveal itself in time. Months passed and life normalized. My parents slowly adjusted, respect replaced mockery, tension turned into cautious admiration, and I learned a final truth about family, about strength, about independence. The house became more than a home. It became a symbol of endurance, of intelligence, of the quiet victories that come to those who wait and prepare. If you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or had your life disrupted by people who think they know better, remember this: patience and planning are more powerful than anger, more effective than shouting, because when the moment comes, the quietest actions can deliver the loudest consequences. The following months were filled with quiet adjustment. Parents tried to visit, but the locks remained changed, a silent message, a polite reminder that patience and planning had their own power. They no longer mocked me, no longer questioned my choices. They watched me live, calmly, independently, successfully. I continued to renovate the house, every project a reflection of my persistence, every improvement a testament to my ability to plan, to endure, to succeed quietly. While others doubted me, friends and neighbors began to notice. Whispers of admiration replaced those of surprise. Even my parents could not ignore it. The house was no longer their dream, it was mine, and it had been achieved without confrontation, without shouting, without public drama. At family gatherings, conversations shifted. They asked advice, they observed quietly, and I gave guidance not as someone triumphant or vindictive, but as someone who had learned the value of patience and strategy. I realized then that revenge had never been about anger. It was about self-respect, about proving that underestimation could never define the limits of my success. Sometimes, I would walk through the empty rooms, reflecting on the journey, the possessions that had been sold, the lessons I had learned, and the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing I had succeeded without bitterness, without letting the past dictate my actions. Life continued. The house stood as a reminder, not just of what I had gained, but of what patience and planning could achieve. The power of observation, the strength of silent endurance. I saw my parents gradually change. Humility replaced arrogance, caution replaced certainty, and I understood that true victory isn't public. It's the knowledge that you've acted wisely and let the world reveal itself in time. I sometimes think back to that day when they sold everything I owned, believing it would humble me now. I know it taught them a lesson about respect, about patience, about the quiet strength of someone who never stops planning. And so, life settled calmly, respectfully, with the house fully mine. My family adjusted, and I carried the knowledge that the best victories are often silent, and the sweetest lessons arrive quietly. Years passed, and the house became more than a home. It became a symbol of strategy, patience, and quiet strength. My parents had adjusted. The initial shock and embarrassment faded, replaced by a hesitant respect. They no longer mocked my choices. They watched quietly, learning to appreciate the person I had become. I continued to live independently, working, investing, improving the house, every step deliberate, every action measured, because I had learned that power is silent and patience is stronger than anger. Neighbors and friends began to speak in whispers of admiration, how I had turned a betrayal into triumph, without confrontation, without chaos, just careful planning and endurance. My parents occasionally sought my advice, not demanding, not entitled, but observing, and I gave guidance calmly, patiently, because the lesson was complete and now it was theirs to carry. Walking through the house one evening, keys in hand, locks changed, I reflected on the journey, the possessions that had been taken, the mockery that had stung, the quiet strength I had cultivated. I realized revenge was never the goal, it was a byproduct. The real victory was in my own growth, my patience, my resilience, and the ability to act deliberately when the moment arrived. If you've ever been underestimated or had your life disrupted by people who thought they knew better, remember this: the quietest victories are often the most powerful, and patience the most effective weapon. Thank you for listening if this story reached you or reminded you that careful planning and endurance pay off. Stay with us on Revenge Reels every week. A new tale of betrayal, new tale of poetic justice. Next time you'll hear about a man who stole his sister's inheritance only to find she had already plotted her quiet comeback, and it would leave him stunned until then. Remember, patience and strategy turn mockery into astonishment, and the quietest victories echo the longest.